Welcome to Spirit Fire, the Co-Creative Path. I'm Dana Blankenship. Our guest today is my friend Margaret Carter. Margaret is a student of palmistry and a very accomplished student at that. Thanks for being here, Margaret.
It's my pleasure.
Oh, good, good. I think it would be fun for our viewers to find out first and foremost, because I know everybody's seen ads about palm reading and, you know, Madam Weirdo and all this other stuff, but it's really quite a science, and it's quite an old science. First and foremost, what is palmistry?
Well, palmistry itself is actually a combination of two studies. One involves the shape of the hand and the fingers, and the other one involves the lines, the markings themselves.
And what do you, I mean, I know that the information is fairly codified in regards to the shape of the hand. What is the difference, say, if someone has sort of a large square hand as opposed to a long narrow one? What would you know immediately about that person?
Oddly enough, you would almost be able to draw a real general conclusion. Anybody would probably say that a person with a large hand is very capable.
Mm-hmm.
They can carry the load. And somebody with a small, delicate hand is more interested in like detail work, you know, little things, stuff like that, yeah.
Mm. So
you can make real general observations that are quite accurate, just anybody.
Just glancing at the size of the hand then. Okay. I know we were talking before the show about the history of palmistry, and I just assumed that it went back into ancient times, and you remarked that there's actually a history in almost every civilization of palmistry.
Yeah, they found handprints on cave walls. And well, we can't know, but wouldn't it be fun if it was...
if they were comparing lifelines or something?
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, the ancient Greeks used it in their medical schools. As a matter of fact, it was used in medical schools in Europe up through the Middle Ages. Yeah, as science came more into... Oh, gosh, I'm blowing it. I'm sorry. As science came... Oh, Dana, please. All right, Kim, I hope you're editing out. As science came to be the more prevailing force in medical schools, palmistry was phased out. However, even in modern times today, palmistry is used, not palmistry itself, but diagnosticians look at people's hands to find signs of heart diseases. Down syndrome is marked in a person's palm. Yeah, quite a few things. Liver, you can find liver damage. Doctors still use that.
Well, and I know, yeah, they check for the oxygen levels by the, you know, what the color of your fingernails, that sort of thing.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting that it was included as part of the education for medical school. But I assume this is sometime, excuse me, sometime around when they were still bleeding each other and
right, yeah, the Middle Ages.
throwing leeches
until
around.
About the Reformation, I would think.
Yeah, the Age of Enlightenment, so they discarded it.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I would assume there's a vast body of knowledge written on the subject.
Palmistry?
Yeah.
you know, that's not really true. There is a lot of ancient literature on it, but it is in ancient languages locked up in museums. Before the 20th century, I would say, I think the last works on it that were like in the Hindus.
Is it part of Ayurvedic medicine? As a
no,
diagnostic
but one thing that's kind of interesting about Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine is that they tend to use the whole body as kind of a divining rod. The Chinese can do predictions from like the shape of the head and the bumps on the head. They can do character analysis. They can do health and character analysis and future predictions on what's going on in the face from moles and warts. They can do it from the soles of the feet as well as the hands. And Ayurvedic medicine uses a lot of like physical clues.
Like the whole body type.
Yeah, so it's all tied in.
So how did you get interested in studying palmistry?
I never, ever thought about doing palmistry, but I was in half-price books one day and I had a credit voucher and I walked over to look at tarot stuff. And tarot, you know, I go hot and cold on because I don't want to have to carry a deck with me wherever I go in order to interact with people. And I was looking at the shelf and I saw a book on palmistry and it's like a light bulb went off. Oh, palmistry, that's it. But of course, the joke is that, had it been 20 years ago, I might not have needed anything to go around and do palmistry. But, I'm in my 40s, so I have to have like reading glasses and a magnifying glass and all this other stuff so I can see the lines on the hand.
The tools of the trade, as it were.
So I'm carrying around more now than I would be had I studied Tarot.
Well, but you might need it at this point, even if you'd started all those years ago. Yeah. Well, are there any particular books on the subject that you found helpful?
There are many good books written today at all levels on palmistry. You can find them in any bookstore. In the library has a wonderful selection of books on palmistry. I'd like to, there's really not one better than the other. However, one that is very interesting to me is called The New Palmistry by Judith Hipskind. And although I don't agree with many of her conclusions, she puts forth a startling view. In all this time that palmistry has been studied, it's been studied from this angle. They've never turned the hand over and looked at the other side. And Judith Hipskind started looking at the other side, and what she found was, outside of general physical characteristics, that there are stick figures and actual 3D faces and, I guess, objects living in people's knuckles, as it were. And she's right, there are. And not only that, they're remarkably accurate at saying what's going on at the moment in a person's life. Now, I'm going to say again that I do not agree with necessarily with how she interprets them, but it has been a major achievement in palmistry to have.
Yeah, it's odd. The subject will just go on and people will just study it based on the way it's always been studied, and it's always fun when someone comes along and says, "Hey, let's see what's on the other side of this."
See what's on the other side.
Yeah. Well, I had the pleasure of you reading my palm some time back, and that was really a lot of fun for me. And I was amazed at the information that you picked up on just based on, the palm of my hand. Do you enjoy doing this? Do you enjoy reading palms and providing that information to people?
Yes, I do. And actually, you mentioned the reading that I did for you a long time ago. A lot of times when I read palms, I get information that I don't necessarily see on a person's hands. Like somehow by touching or looking at a person's hands, information just kind of comes to me, right? But I much prefer the scientific way of doing things. It's like, in feng shui, there's kind of like the magical feng shui, and then there's a very scientific compass feng shui. And I prefer to follow as much as possible a more logical way of doing things. So I can say to a person, see, here it is, I can show you there. So when I hear information, I tend to always look for it confirmed in the lines of a hand. Yeah, but it does come to me both ways, I have to say that.
Well, I could see you examining the hand, and since you've been reading up and you know sort of the foundation, what this configuration means, what this line means, and then using your own intuitive information to interpret it for an individual.
Plus, I like to be able to point out on a person's hands the information that I see because it empowers them. There's no reason they can't be looking at their own hands. There's no reason they can't be getting their own information, that they need to feel more
in control of their lives.
I guess so, yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, in control of their relationships. Yeah, well, I think it's a fascinating subject. You were talking about, before we started the show, you were talking about the sort of the historical perspective and the diagnostic perspective of it, and I just wonder if there won't be a resurgence of including this as a diagnostic tool for more holistic practitioners. Do you think that's possible?
I do, actually, but it's such a complicated study. In palmistry, you are never supposed to predict anything on either one sign or two signs. You're supposed to look for 3 corresponding signs in a person's hand before you give it out as fact.
And what do you mean by corresponding signs?
Well,
like for example?
For example, if you see a sign of illness in the lifeline, you should look for to see if it's in your headline or your heart line. And also, there will be usually yet a 3rd corresponding mark on the fate line. And particularly in areas of romance, you don't want to go predicting just off, like, say, these lines alone, which are very inaccurate, but rather you also check this section here and this section here. It's such a complicated study. For instance, there's this book called The Practice of Palmistry by Comte de Saint-Germain. And he just, what this guy did was, he took every person's hand he saw and gave a history of it with the corresponding marks. And I mean, there's like hundreds of them, hundreds of particular ways that things can intersect in order to get a fuller picture. You'd have to study palmistry for a long time in order to get accurate information from it.
Mm-hmm. Well, perhaps there might be some practitioners at some point that would like to have as a member of their staff an accomplished palmist.
Yes, I'm interested, very interested in the health aspects of it. Terence Stamp wrote a book called Chinese Palmistry, or Chinese Hand Analysis, and he goes into the physical aspects of it quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, you were saying earlier too about that, and you might explain for our viewers how the hand is divided into sections.
Sure.
And what was that?
Well, the hand is divided first off into two halves here, and this, because it has a thumb, is like the active half, and this is kind of like how your mind works, how your mind goes. And then it's also divided kind of into three sections here, and this would be the subconscious, this would be like your regular, everyday, ordinary life, and these would be more like your spiritual concerns. And then they do it yet again. I mean, everything is constantly divided into threes. Your fingers are divided into your physical aspects of life, your mental aspects of life, and your spiritual aspects of life, which is one reason Judith Hipskine's work is so interesting, because when you turn the hand over, this is like your active life. And for people who like to use palmistry as a tool of divination, it's most useful in this regard, because it's a day-to-day account. It's like a 3-month to 6-month account of what's going on in a person's life.
Wow, that's pretty good.
You can also use how a person places their hands. There's like several cute tricks you can do to get a real good idea, very accurate idea of what's going on in a person's life.
By
without
how they
even
place
looking.
them?
Yeah, by how they hold them, put them here.
Well, just as an example, if you were reading someone's palm, and so you would look at the different sections first, like you were just describing, or what could you tell from that?
Actually, when a person comes in to have a palm reading, I watch how they walk toward me, because they know they're there for a palm reading, and they're subconsciously going to be sending me a lot of messages about how they hold their hands just walking straight up. I have a very clear idea of what kind of person I'm dealing with and a lot of the issues that they're going to have. And then I have them go through a little set of exercises, hand exercises. And like I say, before I even look at the hand, I have a very good idea of the reason they're coming to see me and where it's headed already. And the first thing I do is I do look at the shape of a hand, and then I look at the lines. And when I look at the lines, a person's hand will change color. Yeah, it'll start getting mottled in certain areas, certain lines will start changing. And when that happens, because there's so much information available, I tend to go where the colors send me. So in other words, I can look at somebody and say, oh, well, this is happening in your career, this is happening in your romantic life, these are your inner turmoil concerns. But generally I'll focus right away on where the hand sends me to go. And then after I look at the hand, I usually have to look at the hand for 5 minutes before I even start talking. At the very end, I'll have them turn the hand over so we can get like a more practical application of what we're talking about here.
And so by reading the palm, you get a very good idea of that person's history and perhaps even traumatic events that may have occurred, or at least life-changing events. And then are you able to get a feel for some challenges they may face in the future, some decisions and so forth? Is that what you were saying about looking at the tops of the hands?
Yes, yeah. And what's more important is that I have a real good idea of the type of personality I'm dealing with. I mean, everybody is going to face similar challenges, but how is that type of person going to deal with it? And I don't sit down and say, oh, I see that you're thus and type of person. I usually try and more tailor what I'm going to tell that person, what suggestions I would give them to face the challenges that are coming up. And I really don't say, well, I think you're going to lose your job in 6 months and your wife's going to leave you and you're bored parties. I would tend more to say, well, I see that you have problems with certain aspects at work. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, because one of those would be sort of cruel, and the other one would be sort of diplomatic. So,
Right.
And since I know you're not a cruel person,
Right. Well, I'm most concerned with how a person takes that information and changes it, how to empower that person to change what they hear into a pattern that works for them. Yeah, that's my primary concern in doing palmistry.
yeah, and unfortunately, and I think that there's a lot of wonderful resources out there in the intuitive arts, of which I think palmistry is one, where a person really has an opportunity to get a very objective assessment of what has gone on in their life and some very objective and practical suggestions on way to make corrections. And it'd be nice if more people would acknowledge that and utilize it, rather than thinking, it's just like a party trick or something, because these resources are in fact that, resources. So it'd be nice if more people would feel comfortable using them and take seriously what's being said to them. Because I know you're offering the information very seriously and certainly very sincerely.
I think one difference that palmistry has over other kinds of work is that you don't really have a physical interaction in, like, say, tarot cards or psychic readings. And I think that people believe them until like 5 minutes after it's happened, and they don't really believe it anymore. And I see people come to me a lot, like in a succession of people. They've gone to a tarot reader, they've gone to a psychic, they've done this, they've done that. And they're going to try palmistry. And almost inevitably they'll say, oh, I've heard that before. Oh, 3 other psychics said that. But if 3 other psychics said that, what are they doing here? So, I get real interested in kind of stopping that, saying, well, here's the information, here it is, written straight out for you. What can you do to emphasize this or to change that? And I tell them that the lines do not stay constant on a person's hands. Through their own efforts, they can change what they see on a hand. And I tend to use the analogy, the hand of fate. And that's why no psychic prediction can be 100% correct, because it may say 2 fingers out of 5, but there'll always be the other 3. They can say 3 fingers out of 5, but there'll still always be the other 2. There's always a choice to be made.
Yeah, nothing's written in stone.
Nothing is
that's
written
for
in
sure.
stone. Only God is God.
Yeah, and I know what you mean about some individuals sort of make the circuit. And I kind of have gotten the idea before from having met and talked with these types of individuals that they're really hoping to find somebody that will just either A, make it all go away,
Right.
or B, somehow magically do the work for them.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
they don't actually have to engage their free will and get the machinery going and put themselves in a different direction.
I know I do. I'm always looking for the person that'll do it for me. I mean, you get me near a tarot card reader or a psychic, I'm just like anybody else. What can you tell me?
Yeah.
But it's really important, and for some reason palmistry tends to facilitate this, is to get people focused on the journey as opposed to the destination.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. Yeah. Well, and I know, too, since you're the individual doing this and that you have such an enormous pragmatic streak in you, that I could well imagine not only the information that you see in the hand, but the intuitive information that you receive. Since you're the filter that all this is coming through, I would imagine that it's very, very pragmatic and very useful information.
Yeah, I try to send people away with some kind of catchphrase or some small exercise that could be very relevant to what they're looking at in their own lives. I do.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be nice if more people, like I said, would take that approach. The information is offered with sincerity and pragmatism, and it's received the same way. That would be nice. But
plus, I mean, they can look at their own hand and see exactly what I saw.
Well, I think you're right, too, that it's much more physical because it's their hand. That's very, very different from the tarot readings and so forth. I think you're very right about that. I think one of my favorite phrases that you use is helping people, or that you like to help people be able to what was it, cut their own firewood and carry their own water, to really
the Zen approach.
Yeah, to really, encourage that level of independence in people, which I think is really great too.
Well, we've talked about before, like when I've done sessions with you and you've talked about my higher selves, my guiding self, I see that too when I'm doing palmistry. I literally see that being saying stuff, and look, I'm looking up this beautiful golden being who's associated with that person sitting there. If that person's so great that they have this beautiful golden being, I feel the least I can do is kind of hand that power back to them. I don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
So I try and give that person the knowledge that I see so that they can take it and make changes. I almost find it disturbing in a way that these human beings with these beautiful essences are in such turmoil that they come to someone else to have these things read. It's like they can't believe in them. And like I say, I'm no different. 5 minutes after it's happened, I don't believe it either. But I'm very interested in how people incorporate it into their daily life so that, it's one thing when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're looking in the mirror and it's just you and God. It's another thing driving down I-35 trying to remain a godly being.
It's a lot simpler at 2 in the morning.
It's
I
a lot
think.
simpler at 2 in the morning, but the information is as relevant in daily life as it was then. Yeah, so I'm always interested in how to bring the two together, I try to acknowledge the psychic abilities that every person has that I see. And I do that because I want them to kind of melt it together more. So it's not such a separate thing, well, I have to go see a psychic in order to experience this aspect of myself. That's not true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Mm-hmm. And I find I'm a better person. I'll be driving down I-35 and somebody will do something and I think, well, I can't shake my fist and cuss at him because I'm a palm reader. I have to be better than that. I have to set a good example.
Well, I think too, though, that we all, every one of us, reach different points in our lives where, either things have developed into chaos or you're at a crossroads and you realize important decisions have to be made.
Mm-hmm.
And you've pretty much made the decision, but there's still a shadow of a doubt or a little, it just doesn't feel 100% yet.
Absolutely.
And I think that is where psychics and the other individuals can really come in, not to foster any kind of codependence and not to in any way disempower a human being, but like what you're talking about, to say, well, I am picking up on this, and it feels to me like your decision to do this is the best one, to kind of help them sort through the choices.
Like confirm.
Yeah.
And because when you're with a psychic and when you know that the psychic is saying the truth, is because your solar plexus vibrates to it. Yeah. So really a psychic just confirms that which you've already got in your mind.
Yeah, and I think too, it can be very helpful for individuals if you create an environment, which I know that you do in your work, that's very comfortable and
Mm-hmm.
very no nonsense and very down to earth and very humorous. Then I think people do get the idea that this is not some big mystery,
Mm-hmm.
that it's just part and parcel, and it's available to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we need to end the show. But it's been awfully fun talking with you on camera.
Thank you.
Not that we don't talk to each other regularly enough as is. So. And we hope our viewers have enjoyed this conversation with Margaret Carter. And we hope you'll join us for the next Spirit Fire, the Co-Creative Path.